Alright, so we're starting our first assignment. And what I want to go over first before we even get into this is just the layout of Nuke. Um, we're using Nuke 8 for this class, and you'll see in this demo video it says Nuke X 8.0 V1. We may get 8.0 V2, V3, V4. That's not really going to matter. 8.0 is what we want. We want to make sure we have Nuke X also. Nuke X compared to Nuke has a lot more stuff in it. Okay, so always make sure you choose Nuke X. Make sure you have at least version 8, and then we should be good. Okay, so this is the Nuke interface, and I have a project open here. And down here, this is called the node graph, and this is where we're going to be doing a lot of our work. Okay, and compared to After Effects, Nuke is what's called node based. So instead of having a timeline, what we have are all of these nodes. So we have, here's my footage that I brought in, and then here's all those different things that I've done to my footage in order to get the final look of that. Okay, and it'll become more apparent what these things are doing once we get further into it. There's also a curve editor, a dope sheet. There is a timeline here, but this is not like a After Effects timeline where you stack things together. This timeline is simply the start and the end of it. All right, we wouldn't like shuffle clips around. Here's your play buttons, your rewind buttons, your fast forward buttons, whatever, frames per second, looping capabilities, and so on. All right, we'll get more into what these things are as we go. Up here on the top, this is our viewer, okay? And this is just like After Effects, what we're viewing. And we could have several viewers that we use. And you could do that in After Effects also, where you would have one viewer showing the top view of your 3D stuff and one viewer showing the front view or your camera or whatever. This here is our different channels that we can preview, okay? This is a new thing that we'll get into. This here also is some channel stuff. This is some adjustment stuff. Let me just slide this over. The cool thing about Nuke is you can, just like every other program, you can adjust things, spoof things around. You can pull things out. This is more adjustment stuff, and we'll kind of hit on these things as we're going, just so you're not overwhelmed right off the bat of what they're doing. But you'll see, certain times different things will be more important than other things. So this is like your display, your viewer toolbar. So what we're seeing inside this viewer is all based on this stuff up here. Okay. Over here are properties. So we would have, if I were to double click on one of these nodes, here's the properties for that node. And I can specify, if I double click another one, you can see how it's just kind of stacking them in here, and I can get access to all of these. And I can just limit that to, let's say I wanted only one of those items to be in there at a time. So I can say 1, and now when I double click, only one of those items will be in that list when I double click. Or I could say I want 3, and now I can populate it with 3 of them. Okay? Or I could just keep it at 10, and then just clear this whenever I'm done with it. Okay? And you'll see that this thing can get pretty confusing if you're not careful with it. Alright, so there's the properties. On the far left are our tools. So here's our tools. These are all the different things that we could be adding in. And it's going to be a little confusing at first because there's a lot of different things that we're going to be doing, but you'll find that there's a lot of repetition as well. Okay, so a lot of the, like when you're bringing in a file, we're always going to use a read node for bringing in a sequence. So you just have to remember a read node. Okay, and you'll see there's a little shortcut key next to this that says R, and here's the write. That's when we take stuff out. That's the W. So this is basically like importing, and there's exporting. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is the interface. Okay, now Nuke, one of the cool things that it does is that it automatically saves your files for you. Okay, so if you open up Nuke, I can just open up a brand new version of Nuke, keep the other one running in the background. Okay, here's my viewer. That's what we get right off the right at the start of this. If I started working in here and I started creating stuff, let's say I created this, and I connected that, and then I did this, and I went here and adjusted some of these parameters. I went back to this, and I adjusted some of these parameters. Okay, as I'm working, let's say Nuke crashes, it would automatically save this file for me. Okay, now it doesn't do it every 2 seconds, so you might lose some work, but it will save it. Okay, which is a nice feature of it. Also, if it crashes and it reboots, it may say, hey, you have an updated version, do you want to load that? And most of the times you're going to hit yes, that you do want to update that. Okay. Alright, so we have our toolbar here, we have our viewer, we have our timeline area, we have our node graph, we have our properties. These are the major areas we're going to be focusing on. The stuff up here, I hardly ever really touch. The edit one and the file one are the two that maybe I'll touch. These two, not even really so much. Okay, so let's just get into this and see what we're going to be doing. Okay, so what I have here is I have a piece of footage. And this piece of footage, I'm just going to skip through. Actually, it might let me play it back. Oops. Just like After Effects, it has to cache it. So the first time it's going through, it's not really caching it. Okay. So there's my piece of footage, and I can make it a little bit bigger just so we can see it a little bit bigger. Okay. And I found for lectures that it really helps to have my node graph over here. So I'm just going to drag the node graph over to here. Okay, on yours you can keep it down there. You can actually drag it off screen, which is a huge help. But I just like to have this here, and I also like to put my properties down here. Okay, just as far as organization for a lecture, I like it like this. On my home computer, when I'm working, I pull the node graph off and I throw it off to the side, so I have a huge monitor with showing it. Okay, so here's our piece of footage. And one thing I've done to this piece of footage to make it go a little bit quicker in playback is I've done this thing here. Okay, this is down res, and if you look at it, it just says on yours it would say 1. 1 is full res. There's no down resing at all. But as I go 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32, you can see that's becoming grainier and grainier. Sometimes your pieces of footage will be just so complex that you hit the play button and it just takes a minute for it to cache that frame, a minute for it to cache the next frame. It's the same thing in After Effects, but here we have this ability to just kind of, on an overall scale, change what this is looking like. Okay, that way we get a preview of the motion of it. We get a preview of just kind of like the rough of what it looks like. Okay, now overall this is a nice render. It's nothing fantastic, but what I wanted to show in this one, or I wanted us to accomplish, was the fact that we can take something like this and we can manipulate it past the point of just the basic, here's what we got out of the render view of our rendering. Okay, so typically if you're taking like the modeling class or you're taking the rendering class, you'd render stuff out, bring it into Nuke, put it back together so it looks the same exact way, and then you would manipulate it from there to enhance the reflections or enhance the coloring or enhance different features of it. Well, in this one I want to take it and do a complete opposite. I want to recreate something brand new from it. Okay, so here's the original, and there's the modification. So you see how I've really kind of taken this and changed the entire look of of the coloring on this thing. Okay, even here, if we look from there, you can see how powerful that reflection is. If we look at the last one, it's much more subtle. We see obviously the colors have changed. Here they're kind of like a murky green and yellowy color. And here they're more, this is obviously blue, and this is more of like an orangey color, orangey bluey color. Okay, so I really wanted to go that route with it. And there's other stuff happening too that we'll kind of get into. Okay, now one of the big things with Nuke is staying organized. Okay, all of these nodes that are in here, when they get put in, they can be dropped in wherever. And it doesn't mean that it's going to stay organized. Like, for instance, I could have all this stuff kind of cluttered on top of here, but that doesn't really help me stay organized and figure out what's happening. Okay? There's a method to this madness of how these things are organized and how these things are laid out that make it easy for me to find them so that I can manipulate what I need to manipulate. Okay? So as you're going, stay organized. And we'll get into how to stay organized as we go. Okay? So I'm just going to move some of the stuff off to the side, and from your perspective, what we're going to do is we're going to just start right off by reading our files. Okay, so I'm just going to click in here and I can go up to here and say read. Okay, and then I'll read my file in. And then it'll say where do you want to read that file in. So the folder I'm going to give you is going to have a droid rendering in it. And it's actually still rendering out right now. It's the third iteration, and it's taking obviously a bit longer than I expected. It always does. But it'll say 1 to 120 when it's finally done. Okay, right now it says 1 to 108. Okay, and that's not a huge deal either. Typically you can take a sequence, work with the first frame of it, do all your tweaking, and then just reload in that sequence when you're done. Okay. Now in here, when we're reading in a file, as we're kind of clicking around, what Nuke does is it clicks, and let's say instead of double clicking on the Maya, I can single click, single click, single click. Okay. So you have to just single click on these to get the stuff there. Also, Nuke does not like spaces anywhere. So as you're doing any naming, you want to make sure that you have no spaces at all inside of your stuff. Okay, 0 spaces, because it just gets confused. And you see here where it says Documents, Maya, Projects, Projects Hold. If I go back to my C drive and I kind of go this way, see how My Documents has a space in here? Now it freaked out. It has no idea what to do. Okay, because it has that space. So I have to just go back the other way and just do this. So as you're naming things, make sure there's no spaces. Okay, so I'm just going to go and find that piece of footage. It'll be obviously in wherever you put your footage. Okay, so we just click on it. Also, if I click off sequences, you can see how I can bring in just a single image. Okay, so I can either bring in a single image, or I can click sequences on and bring in an entire piece of footage. Alright, so there's my footage. Now just because I have the piece of footage here doesn't mean anything, okay? I have to click on this, and then I have to attach it to a viewer. So I can navigate inside here. I hold Alt and use the right mouse button, and I can move down. Here's the viewer, okay? And I'm just moving the viewer over here so we can see it. I can also use Alt and middle mouse to zoom in and zoom out, okay? Alt right to pan around, Alt middle mouse to zoom in and out. So I want to attach this to a viewer. So basically I want to say I want to view this thing. Okay, that's what this little arrow is for. So if I take this arrow and I drag it to the viewer, you'll see that the number 3 gets shown here. Okay, there's a 1, there's a 2, and a 3. If I pull this off and let go, pull this off and let go, pull this off, oops, and let go, you'll see that nothing is in here. Okay, and this is back to being number 1. So if I drag this to here, now this is connected to number 1, and I can see what's inside here. This 1 is actually a hotkey. If I deselect this or pop this off, I click on the footage and I hit number 1, you'll see how it jumps right to the viewer. It knows that, okay, we want to connect this piece of footage to the input 1 of the viewer. I'll pull that off. I'll click on this again, I'll hit 5, and it automatically puts 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it connects it to number 5. Okay? So what's cool about this is that I could have several pieces of footage here, and I could say, okay, I want this piece of footage connected to 2, this one connected to 1, this one connected to 3, this one connected to 4, and then using my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on my keyboard, I can cycle between each one to see what they look like. Okay, and you'll see how important that is later on. I could also drag this 1 right to the piece of footage to connect it. Okay. And then I have to make sure I click on the viewer and hit 1 to say that I want to see input 1. Alright, so now that I have input 1 here, I can hit play. And it's showing me right now it's playing back at about 5.5 frames per second. Okay, once it zips through, you can see the green line right here. Once it zips through, then it'll play back at real time at 24 frames per second. Okay. Now, how does it know we want 24 frames per second and not 30 frames per second or 25? Well, there's a setting for that. Okay. So I'm going to come over here, and it's really important where I click these. Nuke is hotkey specific. So if I'm over here and I hit a hotkey, is different than if I'm over here and hit a hotkey. So I'm going to go over here into my node graph, and I'm just going to hit the letter S. And S is for settings, okay? So that'll pop open these settings that are down here. So what I want to do is I want to make my project directory and make my make the name of this right here, Droid Nuke, that's the name of my file, and then the project directory would be where I would say, set this. In this case, it's not going to be very important, so we're actually just going to skip it for this one, but we'll get more into that. But if I scroll down, here is my frames per second. So I could change this to 30 if I'm working at 30 frames per second. So that now when I hit play, just let it cache through. We don't even need to see it. I just want to see the fact that this would jump up to playing back at 30. Or it should have. Alright, well, I might be thinking, let me double click this, just make sure there's nothing here. No? Okay. Well, it doesn't really matter anyway. Okay. Just so you're aware, in Nuke, we don't render out a movie. So even if we're working at 24 here, or it's playing back at 24, when we take this out and put it into After Effects, we have to specify what our frame rate is then. Okay. So for this, we're not really concerned with their frames per second, but there it is. Let's scroll down a little bit more, and we can see here's our full size format, and right now it's set to half HD 960 by 540. Okay, if I look at this piece of footage, let me double click it to bring it up. This piece of footage is rendered out at half HD 960 by 540. Okay, which means it was 960 pixels by 540 pixels. So if I go to my root here, my settings, I can specify whatever format I want. So here's my root format, which is 640 by 480, or I could say my format is 960 by 540. Okay, so you typically want to choose, like if my footage here is brought in at 960 by 540, which it was, I want to make sure that my settings are also at that full-size format is also at 960 by 540. Okay. Now it may not say half HD. That's something that I added that we'll get into later, but that's what we want to have set up. Okay. And then that's it. That's all we need to worry about in there. Just setting our frames per second, and then setting our full-size format to 960 by 540. We'll get more into what these other tabs do and whatever else later. So I'm just going to close that, and I can actually close this read node as well. Okay. So there is this. Okay. So now what we want to do is, this is actually, if we look at this icon here, you'll see it has a red, green, blue, white, purple, and a green. Okay. Now the red, green, blue is your RGB channels. Okay. So if I click on the footage out here, I don't need to click on it, I just click out here, and I hit the R key, what it's showing me is the red channel. Okay, so just like in Photoshop where we can look at just the coloring of what the red looks like and what the green looks like, we can do that out here. So I can hit R again to get that back. I can hit G to see the green channel, click G to get it back. Hit B to see the blue channel, hit B to get it back. Hit A to see the alpha channel. That's what the white one is. The white is alpha. Okay. Oops. And then this other one, this purple one, is depth. So if I go over to here and I choose depth, now I can see the depth channel. Okay. So as we're changing stuff, and I'm going to have to keep just squeezing these around just to kind of make everything fit correctly so we can see it. But as I was hitting my stuff, let me go back to RGBA. See how I hit R for red, there it is. Hit G, hit B, hit A, okay. So that's where this one is kind of like a shortcut key to see this. But over here I can really see like the individual channels. Okay, so here's alpha, there's no alpha channel. Here's the depth, so I can see the depth channel. And if you look down here, well, there we go. If we look down here, you see where it says 0.09190 and 0 and 0. This is the value of what I've just selected. Okay, so as I move my mouse around, you can see how that red value is changing. It's updating to let me know the actual value of those red pixels. And in this case, the depth channel is mapped into the red pixels. And up here, I could actually modify this. I can change the look of this as far as what it's displaying. Sometimes when you bring in a depth channel, you won't be able to see any of this stuff. It's just bright white because these values are so high up. Right now, they're basically between 0 and 1, so we're seeing it pretty clearly. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes these values go up to hundreds of values, and you have to just modify it. If I read in another piece of footage here, and I have inside here kitchen, there it is. Okay, so here's a kitchen probe. I'm just going to hit 1 to connect it here. Change this back to RGBA. You can see in this case how as I move my mouse over some of these bright areas, that actually gets up to 3.35686. And the blue is up to 7.16863, whatever. Okay, so these values can get pretty heavy. And as I adjust this, you can see how I can see those values. Here it is like whited out, and I can pull this back just so I can see what those actual values are. It's not changing the values, it's just changing what we're seeing. That's it. Okay? So if I did anything to this, it's still going to be the same thing. But with this here, it allows me just to kind of adjust what I'm seeing just so I can say, okay, there is a value here. I can see that, yes, it is definitely more blue than red or green. Okay? And I just click that to get it back to normal. There's another one here, and this one, I forget what this one's called, the gamma. This one is the gamma, which adjusted a different way. Okay, so sometimes you adjust this one, and we'll see that where we'll do that, and sometimes we'll adjust this one. Okay, I can just delete that and reconnect that one. All right, so we were looking at the depth. There's also a GI pass, so that's what the GI pass looks like. There's a V-Ray dirt, which is the ambient occlusion. There's a diffuse pass. There's a multi-matte. There's a normals. Okay, there's all of these different passes that are in here. And that's what the green one is. Okay, so the green just simply tells you there's a red, green, blue channel, there's an alpha channel, there's a Z channel, but then there's also other channels in here. It just signifies that with the green. So we get a little bit of information on this as well. Okay, now I can see from here, switch us back to RGBA, that's RGBA and that's RGB. I can see from here what if I wanted to see all those channels at once. Okay, and typically if you're a compositor and you get a sequence of files, you want to look at all the channels and see, you know, what's the deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and over here, and this is where as you work in Nuke more and more and more, that you'll kind of get away from using this thing. Okay, so over here somewhere is this layer contact sheet right there. See that it says layers? This is what that is. There's a layer contact sheet. So if I click on this, and I go here, I add in a layer contact sheet which shows all of this stuff. Okay, I'm going to delete this layer contact sheet just to show you something. At this point, it's good to get a piece of paper, get a pencil or a pen, and start writing down names of nodes. Okay, because it's much easier if I'm over here to hit the tab key and just start typing in layer contact sheet. There it is. Okay, I'll do that again. I click on this, I hit tab, layer, and there's layer contact sheet, so I can just click on it and it automatically connects it. Instead of me having to go over here and find it in one of these menus. Okay, it automatically goes through and searches that entire list for it. So I'm recommending that you get a list of nodes that you start creating now. That way you can say layer contact sheet and then give a definition of what the layer contact sheet is doing. It's showing us all the different render passes from this piece of footage. Okay, and then you could also, like the read node, I could click over here, I click off, hit tab, and I could type read, and there's read. Okay, or I could hit R to read something in. Either way it works. Okay, so you want to start keeping notes on this because it'll just make your workflow a bit more efficient. Now let's say that your layer contact sheet didn't come in connected. Okay, let's say I didn't click this first and I added a layer contact sheet. Okay, not a big deal. All I have to do is connect the arrow to my read and then connect this to the viewer. Okay, now you'll see how I connected it to 2 because 1's already hooked up. So I can just click these and drag 1 to that, and that works. Or what I can do is just drag this between these. You see that as I drag between these two things, it automatically highlights and says, okay, I see what you want to do. You want to grab that thing and connect it in. And there it is. So now it connects that layer contact sheet to that. Okay. The controls out here are the same controls as in here. So Alt right mouse button pans around, Alt middle mouse button zooms in and out. Okay. So I can zoom in and I can see there's that guy. There's the other thing. Now it's kind of hard to see, okay, well, what is this? I don't know what pass this is. Well, in our layer contact sheet properties, it'll say show layer names. So I can click show layer names. And now I can see, okay, there's the RGBA, which is our basic, this is what our image is looking like. Here's the depth pass. Here's the multi-matte. Multi-matte doesn't look like it's even correct though. It's odd. Here's our raw GI. Here's our reflection. Our raw reflection. Here's our regular GI, our diffuse. It's hard to see what it says. Dirt. That one's hard to see too. There we go. Raw total light. Those are multi-matte. Oh, that's right. This is a different multi-matte than that one. Here's our normals. This is an other pass. You know, it just doesn't have a name for it, so it just puts it as other. Here's our raw light. Here's our raw refraction. Here's our raw shadow. Here's our velocity, which is how fast it's moving. Here's our specular. Here's our refraction. And here's our reflection filter and our reflection. Okay? So all of these passes, at some point, we could use to combine and basically get the same image and then modify this same image. Well, in this assignment, what I want you to see is how we can manipulate this thing in order to get a better result, to get something different. Okay. Now this layer contact sheet, one thing about it, okay, I'm just going to slide it off to the side here. I'm going to click on this and hit 2. Okay. So now I have one viewer going to the layer contact sheet, one viewer going to my read. Okay. So what I can do is if I'm over here clicked on nothing, I can hit 1 to see the layer contact sheet, hit 2 to see the footage. 1, 2, 1, 2. And you can see how that orange is highlighting to show me the path of how it's getting down there. Okay, this is going to be just a learning curve for you just to get used to. Okay. So one thing to notice also is that as I'm doing this, look at my timeline. As I hit 1, my timeline goes away. Okay, you can see that I have nothing in here, just frame 53. As I hit 2, there's my timeline again. So as I kind of scroll through this and say, okay, I want to look at, let's say, this frame here, I go back to 1, it updates all these, but it doesn't allow me to advance my time. The layer contact sheet is a node that doesn't rely on time. It's basically takes one frame out of here and uses that as its input. Okay? So we'll see that as we go. Now let's say we wanted to see, you know, all of them. We wanted to be able to look at this from whatever perspective. If I change this to global, it's going to give me whatever time frame it decided I'd need it. Right now it's going from 0001 to 3010. Or actually probably 30,100. Okay, because there's a 25,000 here. Yes, that's 30,000. So if I click in here and go back to S for settings, that's another thing that we could set in here. Okay, and you don't always have to set this up, but it's always good to do it. So you can see my frame range right here is 2001 to 30,109. So if I just set this to 1 to 120, now it's going to be locked from 1 to 120. Okay, and I can close my settings again. Oops. Make sure I close the right one. If I click here, it'll close my properties. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure I click here to close my project settings. Okay, so now that we have a timeline, you can see how I can advance this and see different frames of this. Okay, so typically I leave this on input. Unless I get an issue like this where, you know, some of these nodes will kind of knock you off and make it like a single shot. So then I'll change it back to global and make sure I have that set up. Okay, so don't freak out when this stuff happens. Just kind of work around it. Go with the flow of what's happening to get it to do what you want it to do. Okay. Oops. All right, so I'm going to go back to my 59 frame or so. I'm going to go back to here, and I'm just going to connect these or disconnect those. Another thing I can do is if I wanted to look at this, this thing here, how this has an icon, that's called a postage stamp. So if I click on that, it won't show it here, does it? Yes, it does. Under properties for this one, under the node, it says postage stamp. So I can turn that off, turn it on. Okay, so I can do that for any node. So if I come back to my layer contact sheet, I go to its node, I can turn on a postage stamp, and I can see what that postage stamp is looking like. Now it doesn't help me to look at it like this, but what it does help me do is kind of see, okay, that's what that one's doing. But I don't want to have this on for all of them, because every time I do an update, it has to go through and update all of these things. Alright, so I kind of turn that off, or leave it off on a lot of these, unless I find something specific that I want to see. Where is this at? You know, where have we gone at this point? Okay, and any node in our chain, we can do that too. So I'm just going to keep this layer contact sheet off to the side, and I'm going to build my tree kind of coming down here. All right, and this may even help too if I kind of pull this off. Let's do this. I'm going to right click here and I'm going to say split vertical. Okay, so I have two here. I can just drag my properties over to this. That may help. Just kind of keep myself organized. There we go. That way you can see the footage bigger and we can see our other stuff. Alright. Okay. Also, a couple shortcut keys. Tab. You know, you might be used to hitting tab. This takes you to a 3D mode over here. Okay. Hit tab again. If I hit tab here, let's layer contact. It takes me to that area where we can type stuff in. Alright, so tab, I just tab back out. It's also right here. Okay, there's 2D or 3D. Okay. Spacebar maximizes. So tapping the spacebar will maximize any of these areas. Alright. So just be aware of those things as we proceed onto this. Okay. So I'm looking at our first assignment here. Okay, and our first assignment is a CG composite, worth 10 points. Combine render layers with modification enhancement. Screenshot of Nuke node graph. We'll get into the turning in area. You'll turn in a movie and a tip for the node graph. And then it should take you about a week to do this. Okay, this isn't a terribly long assignment. It just gets you to understand some of the basic fundamentals of Nuke. Okay, and in every single one of our assignments, the node graph being organized is essential. Okay, so let's go through and start adding this in. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is I want to start stripping this apart. Okay, so to strip this apart, what we have to do is we have to add in what's called a shuffle node. Okay, so if I click on this and I hit tab and I type in shuffle, okay, and the shuffle node is right over here. Here, there it is, shuffle. And there's a shuffle copy, there's a copy, there's a channel merge. So I'm just going to hit tab and type shuffle. And you'll see that it takes the shuffle and it puts it here and takes this arrow and connects it in. Okay, so I don't want to do that. I want to keep this arrow stuck here. So I just move that arrow back to, instead of going to here, going to there. Right? And then as we start adding stuff in, it shouldn't be an issue. So what I want to do is I want to shuffle, meaning pull out one of my layers. So I'm going to go in here and pick one of my layers. Okay. Now I'm going to use this other guy as a reference, just because this here is kind of like, you get to a point where you're just kind of like tweaking things, but you have to understand what we've adjusted. So the first one I pulled out was raw GI. So I'm going to just make sure I go here and I'm going to pull out raw GI. And what this is showing is it's taking this image, this file right here, and it's extracting the raw GI. So now that's what I'm seeing here is the raw GI. Okay, I didn't have to change anything here. I could have, but I'm not. This is only display. This is actually what's happening. So I pulled out the raw GI. That's all I have to do is choose it from here. I'm also going to name this raw GI shuffle. Okay, that way I know it's a shuffle that I've pulled the raw GI out. Okay, so now this gives me just kind of like a grayscale version of my image. All right. Now I also have, here's the raw GI, I have a raw reflection that I pulled out as well. So I'm going to click off everything, hit tab, add in another shuffle. That's why it's nice to use a tab, because as you hit tab, it just automatically goes to that last one you were at. So I'm going to drag this arrow here, okay? And I'm going to call this raw reflection. Oops. And it says it already exists because I already have a raw reflection item named. So I'll just add the shuffle after. There we go. Okay, now on here I'm going to pull out the raw reflection. Now if I want to see what the raw reflection looks like, just like before, I can just hit the number 1. Okay, so there's raw reflection. There's raw GI. Raw reflection, raw GI. So I'm just hitting each one of these and hitting 1 so I can see what each one looks like. Okay. Now what I want to do is combine these. Okay, I've separated them. Now I want to put them together so that I can see what does this reflection on top of this raw GI look like. Okay, basically I'm just going to add reflection to the global illumination. So if I click on both of these, I hit the tab key, I can add in what's called a merge node. Okay, and the merge node again over here is right there. Merge, right there. Okay, so I can click on both of these, tab key, merge, and there it is. Okay, so this is reflection GI merge. Okay, and what we're seeing now, it automatically connects it. The merge is a node that has 2 inputs. It has more than that, but right now it has 2 that we're using. It has the A and the B, and this is similar to After Effects and similar to Photoshop. When you do a multiply or a plus or an overlay or a screen or any of those other operations. Okay, so what it's doing is it's taking the image of the reflection and it's overing it to the raw GI. Okay, now what does overing it mean? Well, if we move our mouse over to the operation area, there it is, and we put it right over the word over, this is the math that's happening on this. So what it's doing is it's taking the, if we look at over, it's taking the A plus the B, and then the B is multiplied times 1 minus the alpha. That's what that little A means, the alpha channel. Okay, now what does that mean to us? Well, essentially what it's doing is it's using the pixel color information from this one, and then adding it to that one, and then doing some work with the alpha channel. Because neither of these have an alpha channel, oops, well, that one does. They both have an alpha channel, which is kind of weird. Probably could we shuffle them in. Okay, yeah. But it's using the alpha channel just kind of as a guide to put them together. Okay. Now, typically when you're doing a composite like this, we don't want to use an over. We want to use what's called a plus. And the plus, if we look at the math for the plus, is simply the A plus the B. Okay. So it gets rid of the alpha channel stuff that's in there. Right. We could have also deleted the alpha channels from these, and that would have been sufficient, but we don't need to do that. All right. So now here is the A plus the B. So here is the reflection on top of the global illumination. Now if we take this down here, you can see here is my operation plus. My bounding box will get to. Here is the channels. Okay, so I can say just use the RGB. Just use the RGB. Okay, I don't need to do that because we're just using RGB. When we do plus, that's all we're using. But I could also specify that I just want to use the red channels and combine the red channels together. Okay, and then I can say, what do I want to output? I want to output, let's say I just want to output the RGB, or I just want to output the red channel. Okay, so you can specify on a lot of different degrees of what you're bringing in and what you're taking out. Okay, now one thing I want to do is this highlight in here, this reflection is terribly strong. Especially on him, he looks like really metallic. So I'm just going to take this mix and pull this down some. And as I pull it down, you can see his reflection is coming down. So basically I've mixed these two together, and I'm just playing with the opacity, let's say on this one, okay? The amount of mixing. So I pull this all the way off, there's none. And as I kind of creep it back on, there it comes back in there, okay? So now I've just added those two together. All right, I'm gonna hit the space bar here just so we can see our node graph. All right, so already this node graph is getting a bit messy. All right, so let's start organizing this. So I'm gonna take my layer contact sheet and just pull it up here. And you'll see that it snaps. There's actually, if I go to somewhere in here, I saw it before. It's not important, but somewhere in here you can turn a grid on. You don't really need to see that. But I'm just going to start organizing these things so that it's making more sense for us. Okay, so let's say we have our node graph here. Put that there. And I like to have my branches come off and then go, let's say, downward, right? So I'm going to say, okay, here's my raw GI that I pulled off. Here is this merge. I'm making sure everything's snapping so it's nice and vertical. Now, in this case, if this was all I was doing, this would be a perfect organization. But the fact is I'm going to be adding other stuff into this mix as well. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to pull this over. So I'm going to grab all these and just shove it over, pull that over. Okay, and then I'm going to add in what's called a dot node. So if I hold the control key, I get these little diamonds. I'm going to pull this diamond off. Okay, and all the diamond is a way for me to just kind of keep myself organized. And that's its only purpose, is just that. Okay, so by having this dot here, what I can do is my next node, I can connect it right to this. Okay, so this dot is essentially this. Because the arrow comes into here, it's flowing into there. So this is that. These two are the exact same thing. There's no difference. If I added 50 dots here, all of these dots are what is above it. Okay, what the arrows are coming from it. And I can just delete those. Okay, if I added a dot here, this dot would be a representation of this. If I added a dot here, this dot would represent the one right above it. Okay, so this one is the one right above it. That's it. Okay, now above it, I don't mean like, okay, this is right above it. No, I mean I follow the arrows, and this arrow that's pointing to it comes back to here. Okay, so that's the one that's there. So whatever I connect to here is essentially the same as me connecting it right to that. Spacebar again, get back to this. Okay, so now the next thing that I did, you'll see here's my raw GI, here's my raw reflection, is I wanted to manipulate my coloring. Okay, so if we look at this, this that we have here, it's basically just flat coloring. All right. Now I have inside of this, I have some masks that I want to use to extract some of the coloring so I can manipulate the colors of individual pieces. So I'm going to go and do another shuffle. I'm going to drag that there. And let's pull this here. I'm going to hold control, drag another thing. There we go. And I'm going to shuffle out my multi-mat. Okay, let's look at what the multi-mat looks like. The multi-mat is a red for the robot, blue for this frame, and then green for this background. Okay, now if we zoom in close, here's one of the areas that we're going to be constantly kind of battling are these little edge pixels. Okay, and how these things are blending together. Okay, and we'll see that once we start combining this stuff together. All right, so what I want to do is essentially use my red as the robot, my blue as the frame, and the green as the background. Okay, so let's say multi-mat, shuffle, and what I want to do is I want to colorize this one. Okay, so here's my GI merge, here's my multi-mat. The multi-mat has just been pulled out, it's not been adjusted. And when I say pulled out, it just means like copied. It's not like it's like actually pulling it out of there and getting rid of everything else. Okay, everything else is still here. It's just this is representing just the multi-mat. All right, so I want to colorize this. So what I can do is I'm going to add in a grade node. Okay, and grades are great for coloring things. There's other nodes too that we can use. All of these adjustments that are under here are different things that we can use to colorize things. Hue correct, hue shift. There's grade right there. So I'm going to I click off everything, hit tab, and type in grade. And then I can just drop this into the chain. Okay. Now if I go in here, here's the grade node, here's what it looks like. There's a black point. Let's reset that to 0. There's a white point. Reset that to 1, 'cause that's its default. Here's a lift. Okay, here's a gain. Okay, no big deal. Everything's pretty much, you know, just standard type stuff. Oops. I can also reset these up here if I, you know, get too far and have really screwed this up. I can go back and say revert the changes made since the control panel was opened. There's also an undo just for this. So if I did that, I can just say undo. Okay. And then if I really wanted to get back to the things of this, or the defaults, I can say set knobs to defaults. I just right click anywhere in here and say set knobs to defaults. Okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to the gain area, and there's a little color picker right here. Okay. This is the color picker, that guy. This is the color wheel. I want the color wheel. And this is one of the new things in my Nuke 8 is that it pops open this little brackety thing. So I want to use this, and I can colorize this whole thing. Okay. Now right now this is not really helping us isolate these features of any specific element. All right. So it's just kind of like an overall coloring is what we're doing. So what I want to do is use a mask. I want to create from here. I want to pull out one of the colors and use that. So this arrow that's on the right side of this, if I pull this out, you see how it says mask? So I can use this right arrow as a mask for what I want to color. So as I drag this mask area into here, it says, okay, well, I'm going to use this as a mask. So as I scroll down, it's using the alpha channel. Here's the mask. Turn it off, turn it on. Okay, it's using the alpha channel from this multi-mat as a mask. So I'm going to click on here and say I want it to use, let's say, the red channel. All right. Now if we go and look at the red channel is the alien, or is the droid thing. So right now I'm colorizing the droid. So as I manipulate these colors, you can see how I'm manipulating the colors of the droid. And if I switch this to green, now I'm manipulating the colors of the background. As I switch this to blue, now I'm manipulating the colors of that little frame. Okay, so we can set this up to say, okay, this is a picture frame colorizing. And I'll also put a grade. Picture frame grade, I like that name better. It's not as long. Okay, so there's one coloring the picture frame. Now let me add another one here. So I can just click off, hit tab, add a grade, drag it into the mix. Now I can also click on this and just hit G for grade, and it'll just add it into the chain as well. Okay. So I'm going to go back to this one. Now you have to make sure that you're clicking on the right one. If I accidentally have this one still selected, I start modifying it, well, now I'm modifying that picture frame again. Okay. So I want to double click this, make sure it says the name of the one I'm adjusting, and then adjust it. So this one will be Droid Grade. Okay. Underscores, no spaces for everything. And again, we're going to use this little mask thing and drag it here. I'm going to go to this and say use the red, RGBA red. And then I can go to my gain and adjust the coloring on my droid. And I'm just adjusting it just to make it obvious right now. I can always come back and tweak these settings. Okay, so I add another grade, grab this and drag it there. And then come through my mask and say I want to use the blue. Oops, the blue. Nope, the green. All right, so let's just adjust the green. Go to the gain. There we go. And you can see here on these edges where we're getting a little bit of where it's just not blending correctly. Okay, and the reason for that is because, let me jump back to this, it's using the red channel. So you see here red, perfectly red. Here's green, perfectly green. But in these intermittent ones, these changing ones, it gets a little bit confused. So we'll address this a little bit later. Okay, so I want to just get this set up first, and then we'll come back and tweak those settings. Okay, so I'm going to double click this one and we'll call this one background grade. All right, so what we want to do is we want to just basically, now that we have these things basically set up, is I want to adjust this multi-mat and make it just a little bit more crisper. Basically, I want to push the reds out a little bit more because that's where my robot is, and he just needs to have a little bit more transition there. Okay, so I'm going to do a grade on my shuffle. Okay, so I can just click on the shuffle and hit G, and you'll see how it automatically connects it in here, and then it automatically reconnects those masks. Okay, so as I take this, I can turn off my my green and blue channel because I'm just adjusting the red, and I can start multiplying the red. Okay, and you'll see how it's adjusting this and making that a little bit more, going out to the edge a bit more. I could also offset it, but I have to be careful because as I adjust these things, let me look at it while I'm adjusting it, is that I'm also pulling up the red in the green area. Okay, so as I'm here, you can see my red value down there, 1.13. As I'm down here, it's 0.110. Okay, so let me just reset this back to 1, reset this back to 0. There we go. Okay, now if we look at offset and what this is doing, is it's actually offsetting every single channel in the red, or not every single channel, it's offsetting the entire image in the red channel. Okay, as I move multiply, multiply is not touching the red, or the red one in the green channel, it's not touching it here, but anywhere there was any little bit of red, it's pulling it up. Okay, we've actually gotten into like this yellowy area because the red is kind of just so vibrant. Okay, I'm going to turn on white clamp, and what that's going to do is make sure my red values don't go above. You can see right here my red value is at 3.55. White clamp will make it so that it doesn't get above there. Oops. Come on. So it stays locked onto 1 as the highest value for it. Okay, so it really helps to look at it in our final view, is to see what this is looking like. So I just pulled up a little bit of multiply on here to get that to blend a little bit nicer. Okay, now it's not going to be perfect. I can also go in here and add in another grade. I'll just set that one here, add in another grade, and grade the green, and multiply the green up. And I can add in another grade, do it to the blue, and multiply the blue up. Okay, just to kind of make those edges a little bit crisper as they're coming in. Okay, so you can see here, if we look at the before and the after, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all 3 of these grades, and I'm going to hit D for disable. Okay, so you can see how as I disable that, we have a line here, we don't have a line there. Now we've lost a little bit of that reflection area, so we can probably get that back. We just have to play with it a little bit to get it back. Okay, so D is disabling it. So I'm disabling these nodes and re-enabling them. Okay, so I can see where that thing is going away. If I disable this, there's where it's going away. Okay, so I probably made that one just a little bit too strong, so I can pull that one down some. There we go. So that's an acceptable amount. Okay. Let me hit spacebar again here so we can look at this and see that this is actually getting a bit messy now. Look at how many nodes we have kind of stacked in here and how these are going into this, and it's just looking a bit messy. Okay, especially if you think of each one of these. Let me go through and rename these so I can see them. Grade, robot, grade. Oops. The green was my background, yes. Okay. As we look at this and we say, okay, well, what happens if we wanted to adjust any of these? If we wanted to say, okay, let me take this and use this somewhere else. Okay, and I have this mask here, and this mask is just, you know, it's let's say way down the line here, we want to use these masks again. We have to connect it. Just for fun, I'll just add in a grade node way down here. I have to connect this all the way up here. Okay, that's not what we want to have to do. All right, what we want to be able to do is just call up these masks anytime that we need them. Okay, so we're going to tidy this area up a little bit more. Alright, so I'm just going to take this. I'll put that there. I'll put these here. I may have to scoot some of the other stuff over just a tiny bit. Okay. And what I want to do is get rid of all of these. And then I want to, not get rid of all these, but I want to get rid of these arrows here so we don't have that. Okay, so I'm just going to shuffle this stuff down, or move this stuff down, not shuffle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new node right here. So I'm going to go and hit space or tab and go to copy. And I'm adding a copy node. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to copy stuff from here into this pipe. So I'm going to say my A is going to be this, and my B is going to be that. Okay, then I'll just take this arrow and just connect it there. Okay. So pay attention as you're doing this to where your arrows are going. Let's start at the beginning and see where it's going. So here's my read node. That's going to my raw GI shuffle. Here is my reflection shuffle. That's going into my merge. I have my multi-matte shuffle grading the robot red, the background green, the blue frame. And then all that's going into a copy. So my A is coming from there, my B is coming from there. That's very important in this case where the A and the B are. Okay, my A is what I'm copying from, my B is what I'm copying to. Okay, and then this is the result of it. Okay, so we're not going to see a difference right off the bat when we do this, but you'll see where this is kind of beneficial. Okay, so let's look at this and see what we have. We essentially have a red, green, and blue coloring here that I want to label so it makes more sense. Okay, so I'm going to say I want to copy the red channel from this image and I want to put it into a brand new channel. Okay, so as I click on this here, it says a new channel. So I'm going to say robot.mask. It says create a new layer robot. Yes. And then I'm going to go to my green channel and I'm going to copy that to a new mask and say bg.mask. Create a new layer. Yes. And then go to here and say blue new frame.mask. Yes. Okay. So now that's copied all of these into this thing. Okay. So I can break these masks off of there. Okay. Then I can go into this and let me view the end result here. Okay. So now here's the end result so far because I broke all those masks. So basically what's happening is grading it this way, then grading that, and then grading that. Okay. So I'm going to go to my first grade, my picture frame grade, and under the mask, I'm going to say I want you to use, where is it? There it is, my robot.mask. Oops, sorry, I'm at my frame.mask. Where is it? There it is. So this one's using my frame.mask for this one. I double click the droid. I go down to its mask, and I use the robot.mask. I go to my background. I go to my mask and I say bg.mask. And there we go. So now what we've done is we've isolated this shuffling, this coloring into brand new channels. Okay. So now if I go in here and I look at frame, you see I have basically just an image of what that frame looks like. And if I look at my BG, there's the BG. And if I look at my robot, there's my robot. So you see how I've isolated these individual elements so that I can colorize just those individual things. Okay, so there it is. So now I can come into this, into the picture frame, and then I can adjust this and get the exact color I want for the picture frame. I can go to here and just adjust the coloring of the robot. And that robot actually looks better in a kind of darker color. All right, and then here's the background, and then again I can adjust the background color. Okay, and we'll add more stuff to this. This isn't the only thing we're doing to it. Okay, so just so you can see what that chain looks like again, we read it in, we shuffled out the GI, we shuffled out the reflection, the raw GI, the raw reflection, and we merged them together, and we adjusted the mask. Okay, if you remember from when we did this, we adjusted this mix so we were controlling how much reflection we were getting in here. Okay, and that's why there's a little X right up here. This means that our merge is not a full merge; it's an adjusted merge. Okay, and then we've taken from here, we've shuffled out the robots red, green, and blue, and graded them, and then we copied them back in as graded nodes, and then we put them in here. Okay, so we adjusted the grade for the picture frame, the droid, and the background. Alright, so now what we have left to do is we're going to add in the ambient occlusion, and then we're going to add in the diffuse. Okay, so I'm just going to come down here, and I'm going to, oops, not there, I'm going to come down over here and add another shuffle node. Hold down Control, drag my dot node over. And I'm going to say AO underscore shuffle. And I'm going to shuffle out the dirt. Okay, so this is my dirt layer. And I'm just going to take this and merge it. So I'm just going to hit this, hit M for merge, connect the B into that. And then change this, instead of an over, I'm going to change it to a multiply. And what that does, it gives me just a little bit more depth. If I click on the merge and hit D, and I just toggle D on and off, you can see the difference there. It makes a bit of a difference. Okay. So there's that. I also have a diffuse in here where I'm basically bringing back in some of the detail that was in the frame. So let me go and copy this, paste it. Okay, you can do a copy paste as well, instead of just adding in a new node. That way all I have to do is go in here and say diffuse, shuffle, and get rid of that one, and rename this to be diffuse. And I'm just going to merge this in, so I just hit M for merge, drag it into the chain, and you'll see when I merge this back in, it's merging everything on top of it. I don't want that. So what I can use is my mask for my frame. I can say I want to use the frame as a mask, and what I'm doing is, let me just disable that, is I'm bringing in the coloring from that frame. That's all I'm doing. That's all that whole process is doing there, is just giving me a little bit more coloring on that frame instead of just being that solid color. Okay? And I can set this as a plus. It's not going to make a huge difference, but I like to do that. Okay? So now I have my plus there. I could also say, okay, well, what if I wanted the background to be a little bit more what the background color was in the original one? Again, I could just change this to BG, and I have the background color kind of coming in. But in this case, it doesn't really look very good. All right, so we have that. I'm going to add in a Z defocus. Okay, now a Z defocus, what this is going to do is it's going to give us fuzziness in our object. Okay, now we don't want fuzziness all over, we want a selected fuzziness. So what this focal point is I move this to what I want in focus. Okay, and you can see here it's kind of not really working the way we want it to work. All right, and the reason for it is we haven't picked our depth channel. Alright, we do have the depth channel chosen from here, making sure that we did. Sometimes it'll default to depth Z, but the renderer will output it as something else. Okay, so depth Z, I did have to play with some of the other settings. So I'm going to go to the output and change this from result to focal plane setup. And let me show you what the default is, just so you can see what it looked like right when I got it. Okay, so I'm going to move my focal point onto what I want in focus, the robot. When you get into refractions, it can be a bit tricky because it doesn't really, you might not know exactly where our line is that it wants in focus. I'm going to go to focal plane setup, and you can see in here, this little green area is what's in focus, and then the blue is also in focus, then the red is not. Okay, so as I adjust this focal plane, I'm basically pulling in and pushing things out. This focal point is basically picking where, just automatically saying this is where we want in focus. Okay, so I can adjust the focus plane. I can also adjust the depth of field, so I can increase the amount of green that we have there. Okay, so I can take this and change it back to result and see, okay, we're getting a weird line here, and then just play with this until I get the right spot of what should be in focus. Okay, or even just adjusting this until I get it. And then also adjusting this min-max. Okay, the size and the maximum size is how much is out of focus. And in this case, we're not going to get a huge result with this, so it's just going to be like a subtle thing, right? Okay, so you can see there's a little bit of fuzziness happening here. So in this case, they're not going to be too terribly upset about not having too much there, especially in the background. It's not really going to look too blurred because there's not an image back there. Okay. Alright, so if we look at the previous one, that's it. That's the entire compositing part of this. Now what I want to do is I want to add in a vignette around here. And I found a cool trick that seems to work pretty good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this image on top of itself to create that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a merge node. And what I want to do is I want to merge this on top of itself, but I don't want to do this like, because if I just connect it like this, it's hard to see. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the A, connect it there, hold control, and just drag that dot node off. Okay, and then I can connect the B right in. There we go. Okay, so I'm taking this and multiplying it on top of itself. All right. Now what I can do to this also is I'm going to take this mask and I'm going to create a mask. Okay, I'm going to create what's called a roto node. So I'm just going to click off into space and do roto. Okay, so now I can click on the mask, drag it to my roto, and then I can just draw this mask. So I'm just going to click and drag. This is just like the pen tool inside of Photoshop, inside of Illustrator. Okay, there it is. And then what I want to do is feather this. So I can go here and I can say feather, and it'll automatically feather. Or what I can do, which is my preferred method, is I take this little line and I pull it out. And this little line, when I click on here, there's a little line sticking out. That's my feathering line. I'm just going to pull these in more, so I want to get more of that feather. Oops, I pulled the wrong line there. Pull that one. I pull this one. That one. I want to make sure that those lines are all the way outside. If they're not, it gives you some funky results. Okay, so now that's not what we want. We want it to be inverted. So I'm going to come down here where I have a Bezier, and I'm going to click this invert button. Okay, and you can see how now it's inverted. Okay, so this gives you a pretty nice result. Maybe I'll adjust this. A little bit more. There we go. I like that. Okay. Sometimes it's going to depend on the piece as to how much you go, how dark your edges are, and so on. So you really have to not just kind of say, okay, he wants a vignette, I'll just throw a vignette on here, but really play with it to get a good looking vignette. The purpose of a vignette is to kind of draw the viewer into the center of it. And this does a pretty good job. Okay. There we go. Now I can see there's a line happening around here, so I'm going to go back to my roto, click on the Bezier, and then maybe just add a little bit more feathering to the overall feather. Okay, now I want to see what this looks like, but still keep this up. So I have to hit O to turn my overlay off. O to get overlay back on. Okay, so another shortcut key you can write down. I still see a little bit of a line there. I'm going to take the opacity of this down a touch. There we go. There we go. That should be good. Now I can compare it. I just disable, re-enable. I can see the look of it. I still think maybe my Bezier line might be just too much right into the middle. I pulled it out further thinking that would help. I think it really wants to be just a smaller shape. There we go. And I think I'm also going to take this whole thing and just kind of move it there. There we go. That looks pleasant. Okay. Alright, so now let's go back to this and say layer composite it correctly, color adjustments on main object, depth of field, animated. In this case, let's see. Alright, let's see our depth of field off and on. I'm going to make it a little bit stronger. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that we're in focus the whole time. I'm still at 2 for my thing just so it goes quicker for my down res. So I'm going to go to focal plane setup and make sure he was still in focus. Alright, so I'm going to right click on my focus plane here and say set a key at 120. I'm going to go back to frame 50. I can see he's a little fuzzy on the top, so I'm just going to adjust that. And he's out of frame, so we don't really see it. I just want to preview as I come in. I just want to find that good value there. There it is. Okay, I don't want to have 1,000 keys here. I just want to make sure it's, again, just a pleasant looking piece. There we go. Okay. So now that's animated. Good. Glow's added. We can add a glow to this. All right. And it depends, where do you want to add the glow. We can add a little glow after the fact here. So I can just hit, oops, not G. Hit the tab key, then type in glow. And glows are always nice to add to things just to give them a little bit of a softness. And here's where we can use any one of these things. I can play with this and say, well, what does it look like if I use, oops, that's the channel. Okay, I don't want to use the channel. I want to glow all the channels. But what mask do I want to use? I can say, let me use the green mask of the dirt. Sorry, not that one. Width channel. Change the mask back to none. Go to width channel and change it to here. One of these. Now this is where one of these things could come in handy, is that I can go up to my layer contact sheet and I could say, well, where do I want it to glow? Okay, if I look at the reflection filter, around these edges here might be a cool spot. Okay, or right around this where it's refracting, I could have it glow there, or just in the specular area. Specular looks like it might be neat. Yeah, I think specular is going to give us a good result. Okay, we can also try a reflection filter and see what that's going to look like. Okay, so I'm going here. I'm going to say for the width channel reflection filter, and I'll just do red. Okay, and then this is, I'm just going to blow this up. Just, the size is huge, the brightness is huge. There it is. So now we can see where the glow is happening. And I could say effect only and just see what the effect is. See where it's affecting it. Okay, and I can also play with the tolerance to really isolate what it's looking like. There we go. Okay, so that's what it looked like on the reflection filter with red. Let's see what the specular red looks like. We're basically getting it just on the alien guy. Let's see what refraction's going to look like. And that one's just on the TV, or the screen. Okay, so you really have the ability to play with this and adjust what you want to get out of this, or what you want to be glowy. And the cool thing about the refraction one is that as it hits closer to here, it's thinking, that's what that little thing means, that we're going to get more of a glow. So if I go to the effect only, and it thinks, here's where we're getting a lot of glow. If we go back to this, you see we're not really getting a whole lot of glow out of that. It's not until it hits full frame that we get a lot of glow. And then the glow goes away again. So I think I like it here on this one. Now I could also choose, here it is in red, I could also go to green and see if I get a different result. And it's still thinking, that's what that little guy there means. If we hit P, that would pause it and stop it from updating, so we can just undo that. Alright, not a huge difference with green, so I think we'll just leave it where it was. There we go. We'll take the effect only off, or effect only, yeah, effect only off. Okay, and then the last bit of this was glows added, vignettes done, node graph organized correctly. So let's make sure our node graph is organized correctly. It's pretty good. We can go one step further in organizing this to kind of say what we're doing at each step of this. So I'm going to grab all of these nodes here from the multi-mat down to my coloring down here, hit tab, and add in a background, or a backdrop. Okay. And if I want to move this, I can't just move it because it's going to grab all the stuff that's inside there. What I want to do is hold Control and drag the backdrop down to here, and then open this up to that. So I want the backdrop to just be the multi-mat and that stuff. And what I can do is double click that and say the backdrop is going to be my color adjustments. And I can even label it here, color. There we go, color. It's a bit hard to see because of that, so let me just put a return in there and then a space. There we go. Okay, so I know that's my coloring, there's my compositing. And then this is just some extra stuff here. Oh, I did add in a light right here too that added a little bit more oomph to it. Let me just drag this down. This is the cool thing about it, is we can just drag and add stuff in. So I can just add a shuffle node right here. I need to connect it to something, so I'm just add a dot node, add a shuffle. And where is it at? There it is. I'm going to call this light. Oops, hit too many buttons. Change this back to RGB, hit the stop. There we go. I hit L when my keyboard was over here, so it started moving. Light, shuffle. Okay. And then this is going to be my raw light that I pulled out. And I'm just going to merge that into this. And I'm going to do this as a soft light. Okay, and I believe I adjusted raw total light. Oops. Make sure I grab the right one, raw total light. There we go. Alright, now I can go back to the robot, and now I can actually adjust stuff and tweak it to how I want it to look. Okay, so now that we have the basic setup done, now it just comes into the fun part of actually being artistic and going through and just tweaking these settings. Okay, here's our light that just adds a little bit of extra oomph to it. Just let me disable that just so you can see how it just adds another element in there to make it just kind of pop a little bit more. There we go. I knew I was missing something. I just forgot what it was. Okay, so we can go into this and say, here's our picture frame. We can adjust the coloring on the picture frame if we wanted that to be a different color. Let's say I wanted this to be, I can drag this around too. Actually, let me get the droid colored first. Alright, we're actually hitting like a slow part right now where it's just kind of like bogging down. I'm going to use this, which is our region of interest. Basically, I'm isolating what I want to update. And then now as I tweak, it's only going to update those areas. Okay. So I think I want to go in the blue area for him, so I'm going to make sure I have more blue. So he's going to be blue. I like that blue color. And then the frame, the background, I kind of like that color. Let me just see. Maybe I'll... There we go. That's pretty good there. I can just adjust this so you can see a little more of what the background looks like. The picture frame, I definitely want to change that. It's like way too green. And I'm just adjusting the gain here. I can also adjust the multiply. And what that'll do is it'll darken the actual picture frame as well. Let me squeeze this in. And you can see how it's bringing more of that coloring back that we had before. I don't know why it's taking so long to update the picture frame. There we go. So I like the way that's looking. Let me just turn this off. The picture frame could be blending into the background a little bit too much. I'm just going to add another grade in here afterwards. Picture frame coloring. And let me do this. This is how neat Nuke is. I can just hold down, I'm grabbing the diffuse and the merge here. I'm just going to Control X those. And delete this. Pull these down. I'm going to click in No Man's Land and hit Control V. And I'm just going to drop these in. So there goes my diffuse. Oops. Sorry, I didn't want to drop it there. Drop in dot node and connect it in here. And then grab this and just drop it in there. Drag this down. I'm going to delete that picture frame coloring from that one. Just pull that up some. Okay. I think that will help there. Yes, it does. It definitely helps pull that out a little bit more. Just having it in a different order. Because what was happening is this light shuffle was happening to it. Okay. And then this ambient occlusion was happening to it. And then we were overriding that with the diffuse. Okay. So it may be confusing, but I want you to get used to just kind of moving stuff around inside here and adjusting it. Alright, so now if we wanted to, we could add in a grade node for adjust grade. Okay, and then I'm just going to go to my mask, pick the picture frame, go to multiply, and just see how I can just knock it down some. There we go. Okay, so now this is basically done. Alright, I can come back and tweak things more if I need to. That coloring on the picture frame is still bothering me a little bit. Alright, so I think the background, let me go to the background and just maybe lighten the background some. As you get deeper and deeper inside Nuke, it just becomes, there we go. That kind of makes it pop a little bit more into what's going on here. Okay, so we'll be satisfied with that for now. Okay, so we have our reading node here. We've done our raw GI and our reflection, merged them together. We did this multi-matte shuffle where we pulled the robots red, the background green, and the frame blue out, and we copied it back in after we did some adjustments. And then we recolorized those things. We added some coloring to the frame and adjusted the frame some more. We added our light shuffle in as a soft light. We added our ambient occlusion in as a multiply. We did a Z defocus, and then we multiplied the image on top of itself, giving it a roto just for the vignette, and then we added a glow. Okay, so now that we have all of that stuff happening, our last step in this is just to get it out. So we're going to add in a write node. That's our last step. So we read stuff in, we're going to write stuff out. So now where we put this, I have a spot usually inside of my documents. Projects. I like to keep all my stuff together. So where I rendered this out originally, there it is, Droid 3. I make a new folder in here, and I call this Droid 3 out. Okay, that way I know that this is my droid coming out. Okay, so that makes a new folder. I have to give it a name. So I'm going to call this Droid 3 underscore Sarcona dot pound dot TIF. Okay, so you have to give it the name. You have to put the dot. You have to give it the numbering, and then put a dot TIF. Okay, that way, because it's outputting a sequence, that way it knows what to output. And by us typing TIF, it automatically knows to do a TIF. So now we can hit render. It'll say render 1 through 120, which my Maya rendering is at 115 now, but it will be at 120 when you guys render yours. So I'm going to hit OK, and then it's going to go through, and it's going to calculate each one of these frames, and then write it out. Okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into After Effects and put it together. So once this is done rendering, we'll come back into After Effects and then put it together. Alright, so we're done rendering from Nuke. The little dialog box went away. So I can go into After Effects. I'm going to double click. And I'm going to go find my footage. It's under my Documents, Maya, Projects, Old, Sarcona Blue, Images, Droid 3 out. That's the one I want. And then I grab the first one, and in After Effects I just make sure the TIFF sequence is clicked, and I hit open. I hit ignore alpha, because I don't want to do anything with the alpha channel. And then I want to make sure, right now it's reading at 30 FPS, I want to make sure it reads at 24. So I'm going to go to right click, interpret footage main, and ensure that this says 24 frames per second. Okay, so now I can just drop this onto my comp. I can hit the play button, spacebar, or 0 key if I want to cache it. And there we go. Okay, so now it's done. So now I can just go to Composition, add to Render Queue. I'm going to go to QuickTime, Format H264, 100. These are all off. Pick where it's going to go. I'll just throw it on my desktop for now. And this will be Droid Sarcona 2560 Winter 14. Okay, so make sure that every single assignment we do is named with the name of the assignment, your name, the class, and the semester. And then render. Okay, now that's going to go through, it's going to render out. It's done. And somewhere on my desktop, this messy desktop, there he is. We want to open this up in QuickTime once it opens in QuickTime. It's thinking. Oops. There it is. Now in QuickTime it's going to become a little bit washed out, so we want to fix that. So we're going to go to Window, Show Movie Properties, go to the video track, go to Visual Settings, and change the transparency to Blend, and crank it up. Change the transparency to Straight Alpha, and close it. And now if we just rewind, it'll be back to where it should be. So we save, file save, and then we are good. And there we go. Okay. So the After Effects part's done. The Nuke part's done. We just have one more thing if we look at this, what is going to be turned in. Where is it? There we go, file turn in. So your combine render layers with modifications and enhancements. That's our rendering. And then our screenshot of the Nuke node graph. Okay, so we still need to take a screenshot of Nuke. So inside Nuke, we maximize our screen. And we want to take a snapshot of this. Now, we may have to do it in a couple passes just because of how long this thing is. So I want to get it so that I can see it, obviously. So I'm just going to go about here, and then do an Alt, print screen, go into Photoshop, make a new document, paste it, and there it is. So then I can just, oops, scoot down. It's about there. Alt, print screen again, paste it in here. Grab the last of it, and now I can just combine this into one image where I just kind of adjust these things to be fitted correctly. So if I marquee this area of this, I know that's what I need. I can just say invert, delete, and there's one piece. And I'll do the same thing here where I grab all this, invert, make sure I'm on the right layer, delete. And I go to this one and do the same thing. Invert, delete. Okay. So now I can just make a new document, or take this document canvas size up. And we'll put this here. Layer 2, we'll scoot under there, just like a little puzzle. And number 3, we'll scoot under here. And we'll see we need a little bit more room, so again I'll go back to my canvas size, make that 30, and then I can just go through and kind of just nudge things around. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Oops, that's actually that one. There we go, that matches that. I'll go to number 1. And go right there. Okay, so there's my node graph. I'm just going to eyedrop, fill the background color with, oops, that gray. Come on. There we go. And then I can just crop this. So I'll just go to my crop tool and just pull it in here. Pull it in there. And then save. So again, I'm just going to save this to my desktop as a JPEG, and we'll call this Droid Node Sarcona 2560 Winter 14. Okay. And so now when we do our turn in, you're going to have this and this. Okay. So I would recommend that you put those things with your file. Oops. Projects old. I'll just set them inside here. Okay, inside my project folder. You can put them wherever you want to, as long as you know where they're at. So when I come to your station and you're showing me this, we're going to go through that. And we're going to go through the movie. And then we're also going to go through your Nuke file, which up until this point we haven't saved, but like I said, it's not a huge deal because Nuke will automatically save it. So I'm just going to go to Save As and just put this into an area where I know where it's going to be. Okay. And then also make sure that as you were going along that you were also filling out your timesheet, because I will also be looking at your timesheet. Okay. And then that's it. Then this assignment is done. You can wrap it up and call it a day and move on to the next assignment.